Greetings from the U.S. National Cancer Institute. My name is Sudha Shivaram, and I serve as Program Director for Research Training at the Center for Global Health here. A warm welcome to all of you as we begin the first day of the 12th Annual Symposium for Global Cancer Research. We will go over some logistics in the next slides before we begin the session. This year, we have over 1,000 registered participants from 90 countries. And as we participate in the symposium, we would like to remind you that this will be recorded and available on the symposium event site. Attendees will be muted throughout the event. And we ask that if you use a VPN connection, please suggest disconnecting for the duration of the event. And if you can see the slide, but you don't hear anything, please check the audio settings. You may connect to audio via computer or dial into the session using the local numbers provided in your confirmation information email. Please submit questions using the chat box that is shown on the slide. In the next slide, we are also happy to inform you that simultaneous translation is being offered in French, Spanish, and Portuguese for the main sessions of the symposium. And you can select your language, preferred language, by clicking on the interpretation icon that is shown here on the slide, which is basically a little globe at the bottom of the Zoom screen. In the next slide, we also want to remind you that please do engage with us on X using hashtag ASGCR24. Our Center for Global Health is also on Twitter at NCI Global Health. So we look forward to our engagement with you on social media as well as in the symposiums this week. In the next slide, we are actually going to present the roster for today's or the agenda for today. This symposium, we begin every year with a session that is focused on early career investigators. And we are thrilled to see so many of you join us. And this year, our session is titled Training for Impact, Exploring Capacity Development for Clinical Research in LMICs. And we hope to hear from early career scientists, research experts, and mentors about various aspects of training, research protocol development, and research conduct in global settings. So we will begin very shortly after I introduce our director and speaker who will make opening remarks. That will be followed by a session on understanding the landscapes and opportunities for clinical research. We will then break off of Zoom to go to Gather, which is an online platform to discuss and view the posters that have been accepted. We'll come back to Zoom to have some focused discussions on mentorship and protocol development experiences in clinical research in LMICs. And then we will close the session in about 2 hours and 50 minutes from now. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our director. We are especially delighted today to welcome our NCI director, Dr. Kim Rathmell, to make opening remarks. Dr. Rathmell was sworn in as the 17th NCI director in December 2023. She previously led the Vanderbilt University Medical Center as physician-in-chief and chair of the Department of Medicine. Dr. Rathmell's specialty is the research and treatment of complex and hereditary kidney cancers. She also focuses on underlying drivers of kidney cancers using genetic, molecular, and cell biology to develop interventions to improve patients' lives. Please do read more about Dr. Rathmell's research, leadership, and honors in her detailed bio on our website. Beyond her research interests, Dr. Rathmell is deeply committed to mentoring and developing the next generation of scientists, and we are particularly delighted today to welcome her and hear her remarks. Over to you, Dr. Rathmell.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction. It's great to be here. I want to thank the steering committee for organizing this symposium and inviting me. So I will share some brief remarks to kick off what promises to be an excellent symposium with so many opportunities to learn, share new insights, and importantly, to connect and identify areas for collaboration. Whether you're working in research, clinical practice, program implementation, government, academia, nonprofit, or several areas, I hope you'll approach the next few days with an appetite to be inspired. The theme for this symposium, Collaborating for Impact, couldn't be timelier. This is exactly what it will take to generate the innovative ideas and solutions that we need to move our field forward and see more rapid declines in mortality and morbidity from cancer across the world. None of us can do this alone. We need to identify the spaces in between our work where gaps remain and synergies have opportunity. Addressing these spaces and gaps will pay dividend in lives saved if we approach these as opportunities to work together, as you all are doing. Practically speaking, how do we do this? We look to the National Cancer Plan. The National Cancer Plan is a great tool to identify where we can break down silos, work together in bigger and bolder ways, and find synergies. The plan was launched just a little over a year ago and offers a roadmap to toward ending cancer as we know it, where everyone plays a role. There are 8 goals in the plan that I'll articulate in a minute. Most of us work in more than just one of these areas. Cancer is complex, so no matter what your specific research priorities are, we all benefit from looking more broadly beyond a silo and seeing our work and how it intersects with other goals in the plan. Approaching the National Cancer Plan allows us to find ways to permeabilize boundaries and identify unseen opportunities. An important point about the plan, although it has national in the title, it's an opportunity to address cancer progress for everyone, everywhere. The goals are universal. There are 4 health-centric goals: prevent cancer, detect cancers early, develop effective treatments, and optimize the care experience, and 4 empowering goals: maximizing data utility, eliminating inequities, optimizing the workforce, and engaging every person. The benefits of science and research cross boundaries all the time, just as in our work, and we push right through those boundaries of science to follow where the next important breakthrough might come from. I hope you'll keep that in mind in the next few days and engage in what you find interesting, as well as what you might not typically find interesting. Inspiration, as we all know, strikes us in the most unexpected places, just like the journey of making scientific discovery. At NCI, this happens a lot in the Center for Global Health, which supports NCI's mission to improve cancer control worldwide, including through international research partnerships and multinational research efforts. Specifically, conducting research in low and middle income countries allows us to meaningfully address the true global burden of cancer and pursue scientific opportunities that would otherwise not be possible. CGH also supports training programs to develop scientists in both the US and LMICs to conduct context-relevant global research based on equitable collaborations with positive impact on people with cancer worldwide. One example, CGH leads a flagship global cancer institutional training program called GlobeTrek. This initiative has 8 active awards and is building the research workforce and strengthening institutional capacity for cancer research across Africa and Latin America. I had the opportunity to support a program when I was at Vanderbilt, partnering with an epidemiology training program in Zambia. The goal of the program was capacity building, but the learnings were bidirectional. CGH also works with the Fogarty International Center and other NCI extramural and intramural divisions, offices, and centers to support early career investigators pursuing global cancer research through various mechanisms. This symposium also represents an important effort toward our shared mission. I'm especially happy to be here, learning that the first day of the symposium is always Early Career Investigator Day. Training and mentorship are top priorities at the NCI. There's nothing more important than people, both in terms of our workforce as well as our beneficiaries, the people whose lives can change from the results of our research. When I speak about strengthening the workforce, I don't just mean in the US. Today's theme, Training for Impact, exploring capacity development for clinical research in low and middle income countries, is particularly important given the rising cancer burden in LMICs and the poor representation of these countries in cancer clinical trials. Training is therefore a critical area that we need to develop research capacity for by asking and answering clinically relevant questions in these settings. At NCI, we have trainees, fellows, and early stage investigators from all over the world. I want to tell you one quick story. A few years ago, 3 scientists from India one of whom was a very early stage scientist. She had just earned her PhD in 2021, came to the NIH Clinical Center to shadow leading experts of CAR T-cell therapy. The visit helped guide these investigators in designing an effective CAR T therapy that could be manufactured locally in India and therefore made available at reasonable cost to meet the needs of patients in India's healthcare system. And 2 years later, in October of 2023, this treatment was approved by the Indian government as the country's first CAR T-cell therapy. This is just one example of cross-boundary collaboration, capacity building, and connecting. We need these stories to become the norm. And so for those of you who are here early in your career, I want to speak directly to you. You're the future of our field. You're the next generation of cancer research, and your ideas are the fuel that we need to accelerate progress. I encourage you to proactively reach out and to ask hard questions of yourself and others. You'll be surprised by the answers you receive. With our increasingly digitized world, we have more opportunities to connect, and this symposium is a great example. Now completely virtual, it allows us to interact freely and cross these borders. And at the same time, there are many areas around the globe where resources are lacking, where training is inadequate and opportunities simply don't exist to propel people forward in their career. This is an unfortunate reality in too many parts of the world, and we have lots of work to do as a global community to address inequities in clinical research and trials in low resource settings. And that's why this symposium is so important, to uncover the biggest challenges in global cancer control and bring the greatest minds together to discuss how to address them. I look forward to the important knowledge that'll be exchanged through this event to address these and other issues. And so to close, I just want to share a few numbers. I saw the statistics from last year's meeting. 78 countries represented with almost 700 participants. I'm sure this year is no less diverse. This means we have so many more unique perspectives, more experiences, and more opportunities to be creative in our research. I encourage you all to think about how we push boundaries, think differently, and connect more meaningfully so we don't leave behind anyone with cancer or at risk of cancer. There's so many great sessions lined up in the next few days. Let's get started. Thank you. Enjoy the symposium, and I wish you a great week ahead. I'll turn it back to Sudha.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Ratnell. You know, your words about the future of our cancer research is so very important today, particularly as we engage with early career scientists. Thank you again. We'd now like to welcome Dr. Leanne Bailey, who will be serving as moderator to this fantastic panel. And I'll say a quick intro to Dr. Bailey and reminding everybody that our intros will be brief because all the bios are on our website. So encourage you all to go and have a look to get some more details on our speakers and moderators. Dr. Bailey is Chief of the Integrated Networks branch of the NCI Center to Reduce Cancer Health Disparities. In this role, she manages, develops, and assesses strategies for enhancing the integration and dissemination of diversity training, women's health, and sexual and gender minority efforts within and across the NCI, as well as within the scientific community and underserved communities through the NCI-supported networks. Over to you, Leanne.
Thanks so much, Sudha, for that kind introduction. And we are absolutely ecstatic to welcome you to our opening session titled Understanding the Landscape and Opportunities for Clinical Research in LMICs. In this session, we will focus on the opportunities and experiences in developing clinical research capacity in low and middle income countries, otherwise referred to as LMICs. We will hear from experts and scientists who are working in LMICs about their efforts in research training, developing collaborations, and developing capacity building within clinical trial networks in LMICs. We will start with presentations from each speaker in the order that is listed on the agenda. The session will conclude with 15 minutes of Q&A, and during the Q&A, we will ask everyone to put their questions in the chat. And I will voice your questions to speakers in conjunction with Sudha. So now let me introduce our speakers. Our first speaker is Dr. Ophira Ginsberg. She is Senior Advisor for Clinical Research at the NCI Center for Global Health. Her talk will outline ongoing efforts in developing context-relevant clinical research in LMICs And we'll also highlight unique opportunities to advance cancer science by supporting clinical research in LMICs. Dr. Ginsberg is a medical oncologist and a global women's health researcher with over 20 years of experience, and recently led the Lancet Commission of Women, Power, and Cancer. We will then turn to developing clinical research capacity in LMICs. And Dr. Priya Ranganathan will share lessons from the International Collaborative Research Methods Development in Oncology, or CREDO workshop in Mumbai, India. In addition to serving as the lead organizer for CREDO, Dr. Ranganathan organizes the Master's in Clinical Research degree program at the Tata Memorial Center in Mumbai, where she also serves as a professor of anesthesiology. And we will finish this session with another important component of capacity building, which is collaboration and clinical trials networks. Dr. Vikrant Sahrabudi will share highlights and lessons learned from both the NCI, HIV, HPV cancer prevention clinical trials networks. And Dr. Sahrabudi is a deputy chief of the Branch and Gynecological Cancer Research Group and a program director in the Division of Cancer Prevention at the National Cancer Institute. He oversees prevention clinical research on cervical cancer and other HPV-related cancers. And now, without further ado, I'm going to turn the floor over to our first speaker. Over to you, Afira.
Thanks so much, Leanne. It's a pleasure to be here. I am just about to share my screen, and I'm going to try to, sorry, I'm sharing my screen, and here we are. I hope that looks good. So I'm going to try to be brief in my comments. I think most people here are aware of why we are trying to do this effort with all of you to advance capacity building for.
Afira, we are not able to see your slides.
Oh, you can't see my
Yeah.
slide?
Oh, yeah, you might want to try again.
Oh, I'm so sorry for that. Share screen and share, and that should be good now. Yes?
It's
All right.
perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So a little background, just to say that I think most of you are aware that cancer clinical trials at the moment really don't adequately reflect the needs in many countries. They are not really as inclusive of diverse populations, of health systems, or geographical settings. And we need these really to be more applicable to the local context, local resources, and local logistics and accessibility constraints. I skipped through a slide just because I think it's important to try to make sure we have a lot of time for Q&A, and we're a little behind time. So we undertook a series of formative research elements, starting with a portfolio analysis. That's when we here at NCI take a look at what we have in our own funding portfolio, what that looks like. And we saw that between 2012 and 2021, in that 10-year period, that we funded 37 clinical trials with locations or facilities that were exclusively in LMIC and low and middle income countries. But that's out of almost 8,000 trials in total. So here is all trials funded by NCI, administered grants. Here's the number of trials, 200, with at least one facility or location in a low or middle income country. And here's 37 that were exclusively conducted in low and middle income countries. In addition to that, we also looked at the situation from the perspective of key informants. So we did key informant interviews. We also did a request for information, which is where the NCI publishes a question basically for everyone who wants to respond. And we found that the top reported challenges by people actually working in the field, like many of you, many countries throughout the world. This was 14 key thought leaders, and I kind of put together the results also from the request for information. And we saw that the top reported challenges were workforce capacity, and that includes lack of training, which is one of the reasons we have this theme today, lack of dedicated time. Many clinical researchers, including in all countries, but especially in resource-constrained settings, do say that they don't have any protected time. And particularly when you're seeing so many patients every day, it's really very hard to imagine how you can take time to conduct research without the kind of support from your institution that you need. Lack of material capacity and operational constraints as well were important. We also asked about strategies. So what are the kinds of things that people in LMIC who want to do more in the clinical research domain, particularly in trials, need? Partnerships came out as one of the key aspects of building and sustaining partnerships in South-South engagement, as well as working with high-income countries like the US, UK, et cetera. Human capacity again, so the flip side is how do you then develop more human capacity, which is going to be a big point of discussion today, as well as funding and awareness. Awareness in terms of the public's awareness of the importance of clinical trials, and also our own colleagues' awareness of how clinical trials can be used to advance the best science that can render better treatments everywhere. We also did a community engagement exercise at the World Cancer Congress in Geneva in 2023, and we had a lovely partnership actually with ASCO at last year's annual meeting, which included leadership also from Aortic, and many of you were there. We spoke with the ASCO International Affairs Committee, regional councils, leadership from the research committee, and we also started to see some similar themes emerging, asking what are the major gaps and what are the key opportunities. The key themes were representation, funding, resources, contextual relevance, and disease burden, as well as regulatory issues and ethics. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that some of the people in the room reminded us that clinical research is just one element amongst others to help strengthen the health system. And so we don't want to ignore that fact, but in our efforts in this domain, we're trying to look at how we can improve access to clinical trials as part of that process. I'll come back to that at the end. We then conducted a major survey, and the results aren't out yet. Many of you kindly participated. Just want to make a couple of points here and show you a little preview of what's to come. The survey was done to provide an understanding of the landscape of clinical trials in low and middle income countries by extending that work that we started with the key informants and the more detailed in-depth discussion. And you'll see here we had it translated into, I think, 5 languages. Unfortunately, we didn't have gender parity. We had 62% male recipients, and we can talk about why that is, but we did have a good number of female participants as well. 30% were medical oncologists. We really did try to get the full breadth of specialties and disciplines, including pediatric oncology, surgery, nursing, et cetera. And not to go into this in too much detail, but just to show you a smidge of the work setting in which respondents were situated in. Most were in academic settings, many were in public hospitals, but a good deal were also in private hospitals, with a smaller group working for nonprofits and government. Career stage, most relevant to today, to our early career investigator days, we had almost 40% mid-career and 22% early career participants. And the last slide on this is just to give you a little flavor. We also had good geographical breadths with 36 responses from Latin America and the Caribbean, 45 responses from sub-Saharan African countries. And you can see the top country here being 13% of the respondents were based in India and 12% in Brazil. But then we had some respondents from many, many additional countries. You're going to soon see the full set of data with the responses, including, most importantly, the solutions that many of you are offering for us to consider as we take all this into account at NCI, working through a process to discuss what a network might look like in the future to help support these kinds of activities. Finally, in terms of our landscaping efforts, we have patient and advocate focus groups that are about to start. We're just going through our usual processes with IRB, and this is to gain an understanding of the current role of patients and patient advocates and the role that they wish we would take, they wish they would be able to take in order to co-create opportunities in clinical research, and particularly in clinical trials. We're going to have 2 focus groups per WHO region, 6 regions, so there'll be 12 focus groups. And now I just want to take a couple of minutes to give you 2 examples of clinical trials that were either developed and conducted entirely in a middle-income country which is the case in this phase 3 superiority study for head and neck squamous cell carcinoma in India. And the other example is where it's a multi-centered, multi-country study that included several countries that are middle income and rendered results that are clinically meaningful, important, and potentially practice changing, particularly in settings with lesser resources, especially financial resources for treatments, as well as availability of some of the newer agents. So the first example, you may already have heard this. We had one of the lead authors in one of our seminars this year describe this in detail, but just a quick overview that head and neck squamous cell carcinoma accounts for more than 10% of new cancer cases and 8% of cancer deaths. It's a very important and unfortunate killer of women and men, by the way, in India and other countries where smokeless tobacco and tobacco is a major problem. Therapies prescribed by the guidelines body, NCCN and ESMO, are really accessible to only 1 to 3% of patients in LMIC due to cost. And triple metronomic therapy, which is oral methotrexate, celecoxib, and erlotinib, has been shown to improve survival in the absence of these drugs. And that is considered a standard for locally advanced head and neck cancer in this setting. So the hypothesis was, what if we add a very low dose of Nivo to this TMC, this metronomic oral chemotherapy, and see if that could improve survival? And the short version of this 1 year's overall survival slide is it worked. And they found an increase in 1 year over survival. These are absolute numbers from 16% to 43.4%. So that's quite a remarkable change. And you can see the median overall survival here. It should be noted that this was a flat dose of 20 milligrams, which is only 6% of the approved FDA dosing based on other preliminary data. So this actually made it into Journal of Clinical Oncology, which, as you know, is one of the top journals for clinical research, and was accompanied by a commentary by Aaron Mitchell and Daniel Goldstein, who said that by using a small fraction of the nivolumab dose approved in the US and Europe, this treatment regimen dramatically reduces the financial cost of immunotherapy, with the potential to increase access and improve patient outcomes in low and middle income countries. So it's a very good example that we can think about as we go forward in our discussions today regarding the importance of training in clinical research methods.
Ophira, just a warning about the time as well.
Sure. I actually put my little thing on, but I put it on late. Yeah. The second trial was the Interlace trial for locally advanced cervical cancer that many of you will know about, that showed an 80% overall survival with an induction chemotherapy regimen, just 6 weeks of standard chemo, plus the standard of care, which is chemoradiation. And that was 80% versus 72% in the standard arm. This is, again, potentially game-changing with drugs that are already available and accessible and affordable in many settings, although we have a lot of room to move there as well. So I'm just going to end with a question for everyone here. Why put effort into the training and capacity building for clinical research in low-income and middle-income countries, given what we all know about other health systems issues and so on? And the answer is, first, it's simply the right thing to do from an equity standpoint. And I like to think of it in terms of the rising tide lifting all boats. As we undertake this work to develop the clinical cancer research ecosystem, we also have the added value of educating each other in critical appraisal skills, in understanding how to read with a critical eye the research that we see every day. Even if we're not going to lead or participate in clinical trials, by the way, it can help advance equity in quality cancer care for all of us. So I'll end there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ophira, for setting the stage for our discussions this morning. At this time, I'm going to invite Priya to provide her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leanne, and it's such a pleasure being here today. So I'm going to talk about the lessons that we've learned from the Credo workshop. As you know, there are 3 oncology research development workshops in the world, and these are located in the US, in Europe, and in Australia. Now, the problem with these workshops is that they accept only a fraction of applicants. They prioritize participation from their own regions. They focus on drug development, which may not be a priority in LMICs, and they have very high participation costs. Ophira has very beautifully laid the background for what I'm going to speak about, why it's important to train researchers from LMICs to do locally relevant research. And so we found that there was need for a workshop to train oncology researchers to carry out high quality context-specific research to answer locally relevant questions. And thus evolved the CREDO workshop, which is an initiative of the National Cancer Grid of India. The objectives of this workshop are to train researchers in oncology in various aspects of clinical research methods and to help them to develop a research idea into a structured protocol, to promote collaborative research, and to build research capacity in oncology. Now, this workshop is open to researchers with training in surgical, medical, or radiation oncology or any related branch. We prefer early and mid-career researchers working in an academic setting who can demonstrate commitment to continuing research in oncology. Participation is through a competitive online application process where the applicant submits a 1-page research concept note along with a statement of purpose and a letter of support from the mentor. And the applications are reviewed by a team of international and national experts. The format of the workshop is an intensive residential 6-day workshop, which usually runs from Sunday to Friday. We've had 7 workshops so far, the last being in March 2024, and several of the people on this panel were actually faculty at that workshop. So during the workshop, we cover a variety of topics, including the drug development process, phases of clinical trials. We go over study designs, both observational and interventional. We discuss protocol writing. We cover statistics, research ethics, publication, research funding. And we also pay attention to some specific issues such as quality of life research, research on health economics, and implementation research. The workshop is divided into 4 types of sessions. We have didactic lectures. We have focus groups discussions for niche areas. We have one-on-one office hours or meet the faculty sessions. And the crux of the workshop, which is the protocol development session. So during these protocol development sessions, participants and faculty are divided into groups of 8 participants and 4 faculty. And the faculty are a mix of trialists, subject experts, and statisticians. Individual protocols are discussed in detail with a different section of the protocol being developed each day. Participants benefit from developing each other's protocols as much as their own. At the end of each day, participants are given homework to be mailed to the faculty. Faculty edit the homework overnight and return it to the participants by the next morning. And so over the 6 days of the workshop, the 1-page research concept gets converted into a full-fledged protocol. Now, in addition to these workshop formats, we have some pre-workshop webinars which start 3 months prior to the workshop to help participants to come better prepared and to optimize their time at the workshop. So during these online sessions, we lay the basis for some topics like literature search, an overview of protocol writing, a very basic discussion on study designs, some aspects of biostatistics and research ethics. We also conduct a virtual session within each protocol group so that the protocol mentors can provide some initial feedback on the concept notes. We recognize the need for continued mentoring after the workshop, and so we have monthly webinars to discuss various aspects of research methods. These are usually didactic talks, but we also include some aspects of problem solving. And in fact, Sudha is going to be talking to our participants next week. So over these last 7 years, we've trained more than 400 participants at this workshop from more than 20 different countries. We've also trained observers, including statisticians from various parts of India. And this is an effort to build research capacity. Our participants come from varied backgrounds. So as I said, our focus is not on drug development. And unlike the other 3 workshops, we have quite a few participants who are surgical oncologists, radiation oncologists, and from allied specialties, including palliative care, public health, imaging, pathology, nursing, dentistry, and so on. So the workshop outcomes, the immediate workshop, we administer pre and post-test questionnaires, and this has shown a sustained improvement in test scores after the workshop. In addition, every single participant who has come to the workshop with a concept note has been successful in converting it into a protocol, which means over the last 9 years, we've had more than 400 research protocols developed at the Credo workshops. In addition, we have regular follow-up to assess the status of the protocols, and more than half of our participants so far have either published or conducted their study and are in an advanced stage of analysis. Most of our participants also report an improvement in their research output beyond the Credo protocols, and we have plenty of examples of sustained collaborations and networking after the Credo workshop. Participants also report that they are in a better position to mentor their colleagues and trainees after attending the workshop. So what makes Credo unique? It is the only workshop of its kind to be conducted in an LMIC. As I said, the background of the participants is varied, and we don't restrict ourselves to core clinical specialties. We encourage various types of research ideas: observational, interventional, surveys, population-based studies. We include pre- and post-workshop sessions to ensure continued support to participants. We offer funding opportunities for research to some of the participants who attend the workshop, and there are some criteria for that. We have a very robust follow-up program, which ensures that participants feel motivated to continue the protocol that they developed at Credo. And finally, it's a highly subsidized workshop. And when I talk about highly subsidized, the workshop fee is $200 USD for participants from LMICs, and this covers the entire stay for 6 days, plus access to workshop resources. We also offer travel and registration grants through various institutes, and that is how we are able to subsidize the fees. Obviously, NCI has been a supporter of this workshop for several years now. So overall, if you look at the impact of Credo, we promote context-specific research, some of which is potentially practice-changing. And as I said, there are several trials which were developed at Credo, which are now underway as full-fledged projects, and we eagerly await their results. We are developing research capacity by training researchers and statisticians, and by creating a pool of mentors who can train others. We provide opportunities for research funding, and we promote multicentric collaborations. These are our Credo faculty and participants over the years, and I must admire our faculty who put in so much of effort and come year after year to train the researchers. Credo would not be possible without the support and from all these various organizations who have funded us, endorsed us, and allowed us to use their logos and promoted us in multiple ways. For those who are more interested, we wrote a paper in the Lancet Oncology a few years ago, and you can read more about the workshop and its impact. So those are our contact details. That's our website, that's our email, and we are on X. It's at Credo Workshop. So if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take them either now or later.
Thank you so much, Priya. Very fascinating and really impressive to hear about the work of the Credo workshop. It's especially great that the workshop content is LMIC led and really addresses the clinical research needs in those settings. And so now I'd like to invite Vic to share his presentation with us, please.
Sure, I am sharing my slide in a second here. Let me know when you.
We can see it now.
Okay. So thank you again to our Center for Global Health colleagues for inviting me to give this talk focused on collaborations and capacity building for prevention clinical trials, taking a little bit of a different angle here than the previous two speakers, which were primarily focused on therapeutic trials. And I'm going to give observations from our HIV and HPV cancer prevention clinical trials networks. I do not have any conflicts of interest, and of course, the opinions that I'm going to speak here are mine alone and not as official positions or funding priorities of the NCI. I also want to put a note that I tend to put a lot of information on my slides, but I don't intend to go over everything in my presentation. My slides are available for sharing on request or will be shared by CGH. I want to focus very briefly in my presentation about three primary areas. One, around the high burden and the intervention opportunities for prevention and interception of these cancers in the context of HIV. Secondly, on the efforts that we have undertaken last few years on developing and supporting collaborative networks for the prevention of these cancers and addressing the gaps in evidence in this context. And thirdly, to describe a little bit of what we are doing to enhance the individual and institutional clinical research capacity in these networks. The motivation for a lot of our work comes from a clarion call that's around globally now for the past few years to consider eliminating cervical cancer as a public health problem through a variety of targets for vaccination, screening, and treatment. And nowhere is the problem of cervical cancer even more prominent than in individuals with HIV who have a high burden of HPV-related precancerous disease, as well as its higher chance of progression to invasive cervical cancer. In fact, data show that women with HIV have almost 6 times higher risk for developing cervical cancer than the general population, which motivates a lot of what our work is in this space. This is really driven by the fact that despite now almost 40 plus years after the HIV epidemic, more than 39 million individuals continue to live with this disease globally, more than 20 million of whom are women. And the numbers, although have declined in the last several years, still continue to have new infections to the tune of about 1.3 million every year. That just goes to show that there are several gaps to reach in terms of achieving HIV control. But one thing that has happened over the last several years, primarily as a result of increasing access to testing, as well as connecting those who are test positive to treatment and then to viral suppression, is to actually increase the numbers of those who access HIV care significantly. In fact, as a result of life-saving antiretroviral therapy, many individuals now live long enough, but possibly long enough to almost let manifestation of some of the other cancers like HPV-associated cancers like cervical cancer. And therefore, we ask ourselves this question that how can we and why should we persons who live with HIV die due to lack of effective HPV-related cancer prevention interventions after we have extended their lives with antiretroviral therapy? In fact, that is really the motivation for this work. Some of it is coming from advances in the space of HPV and cervical cancer, including self-collection related technologies that are poised to make a lot of improvements in access to cervical cancer screening, but also the availability of several point-of-care visual and diagnostic approaches, as well as several ablative or excisional devices that might be able to permit us intervention opportunities at an earlier stage in the disease progression pathway. Linked to that, there have been several developments through bilateral and multilateral initiatives for increasing access to cervical cancer screening and treatment. Primary amongst those are the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, or the PEPFAR program, which through a partnership with public and private sector stakeholders has resulted in addressing cervical cancer prevention in women with HIV who are under care through PEPFAR programs. Of course, the WHO's Global Cervical Cancer Elimination Initiative is a catalyst for a lot of activities that are underway globally. One of the key highlights that we at the NCI are very proud of is the fact that US government bilateral as well as multilateral development assistance is a major source of funding that we need to capitalize on, has been a real mainstay for HIV related funding all these years for the past several decades. And NIH, which continues to be the single largest source of biomedical funding and behavioral research in the world, has amongst its priority areas a strategic plan focused on HIV-related research. And in that research, several NIH institutes, including the NCI, devote a significant effort towards addressing HIV-associated comorbidities, co-infections, and complications, which is really how we are trying to focus some of our efforts on. Listed here, and I'll be going over briefly, are 3 networks: ULACnet, Cascade, and Last Mile Initiative, or the SHIP network, where we'll talk a little bit about how some of these collaborations and capacity building efforts are currently underway. I want to highlight at the outset that there are some really unique features in cancer prevention trials that are especially in contrast to therapeutic trials. One, the fact that these trials are of much longer duration, larger sample sizes, and harder to recruit, primarily because the interventions that are available have much lower thresholds of toxicity, since they are being done in healthy or asymptomatic individuals and are mostly done without an expectation of additional benefit than the standard of care a particular individual who's enrolling in a trial receives. Of course, these trials are done both focused on clinics and done in individuals, as a therapeutic trial would be, but are also done at a community level or at a population level, which makes it, of course, harder, larger, as well as longer in its effort. I want to start off by our effort in the Latin American and the Caribbean region through the network called ULACnet. It is a partnership center focused cooperative agreement network where the goal is to optimize the efficacy and effectiveness of HPV related prevention interventions in people with HIV in the Latin American and Caribbean region. Largely as a result of several decades of work between the US and partner institutions in this region, we were able to take advantage of existing partnerships and currently work in 6 countries that are listed here, which all are focusing on 3 of the primary areas that are having several outstanding research gaps in the context of HIV, including areas focused on optimizing dosing and delivery of HPV vaccines, evaluating new biomarkers and technologies for screening and triage in this population, as well as evaluating new non-excisional treatment approaches for persistent infection and pre-cancer. What we have done over the past 5 years is to be able to launch with these partners in this network 5 large clinical trials that are at various stages of accrual. As you can see here, these trials began with a bit of a delay after COVID and had a lot of adaptations to be done due to COVID, but have now successfully enrolled more than 2,500 participants as of last month. This slide is slightly out of date, but what we have been able to really contribute to is strengthen the collaborations that already existed between US and Latin American investigators and institutions, but really take advantage of these collaborations and enhance the specific capacity at these institutions, or build a capacity de novo in both clinical as well as laboratory aspects. For example, we built capacity for colposcopy or high-resolution anoscopy in a variety of clinic settings, including HIV settings, STI settings, and primary care settings. But we also installed and operationalized point-of-care HPV testing platforms in these settings. These network efforts have also resulted in installations of platform for innovative molecular and cytologic triage approaches, which are now slated to be operationalized for testing the samples that are being collected in these studies. But more importantly, because these are resources that have a long lifespan and there are highly annotated specimens, we have also invested in enhancing capacity of these institutions for long-term storage of these study specimens for future use. One other thing that we are very proud of is the ability to support trainees and investigators at these sites through a variety of supplements as well as other funding opportunities. In particular, diversity supplements, which have been a real mainstay for many of these training efforts, have really sought to train individuals from a variety of backgrounds, including physicians, epidemiologists, molecular biologists, as well as behavioral scientists across the range of topics that are listed here. I want to also highlight that community engagement activities have also been a mainstay for enrolling participants in this network. And thanks to the extraordinary work done by our colleagues and partners in this network, a variety of individuals who are typically stigmatized and marginalized in the communities because of their HIV status, or they're being at risk of a variety of other health-related discrimination aspects, have been able to participate and enroll in the clinical trials that are currently underway. I want to pivot next to another effort that we are undertaking. This is really to address a secondary prevention care cascade in people with HIV. As we all know, just having access to screening is only the first step of the screening to treatment pathway. And at every step of this way, there are several failures that are liable to happen and need to be addressed, understood, and intervened upon, which was really the motivation for our newest network, Cascade, which is really focused on conducting pragmatic clinical trials to evaluate the clinical effectiveness of prevention interventions in the intended use settings by focusing on optimizing the screening, management, and pre-cancer treatment cascade. In this network, which was launched in 2022 with full set of slides just funded within the past year, works in 9 clinical sites in 7 countries, the US as well as 6 sub-Saharan African countries, where the focus is on collaborations in a very flat world model, where we have research bases with US-based institutions along with LMIC-based investigators collaborating with US and international-based clinical sites, as well as a coordinating center. What we have been able to focus on in Cascade are pragmatic clinical trials with hybrid effectiveness implementation designs. And those designs really reflect the type of questions that are really outstanding in this space, focused on areas such as screening uptake, management of screen positives, improving pre-cancer treatment access, as well as optimizing pre-cancer treatment. We also collect secondary endpoints that are really geared to be informing future implementation and scale up of these interventions after the effectiveness of these interventions in a real world clinical intended use setting is proven through the primary endpoints here. The Cascade network brings the basis sites, the coordinating center, and the NCI together on a steering committee, which is really empowered with approving concepts and creating a variety of these activities that are listed here. In fact, we have working groups that span methodologies, data collection and harmonization, as well as quality assurance, but also task groups that are focused on discrete activities that are really required for managing a network of this size. We currently have 3 international and 1 domestic network protocol currently in development, as well as a very wide clinical services utilization mapping initiative underway at these clinical sites. As you can see here, this is a really flat world horizontal network of PIs as well as their collaborators from across the world, and really trying to capitalize on the groups that are really leaders in this space, trying to work collaboratively to address some of the outstanding questions in this area. I also want to briefly highlight our Last Mile initiative, which is really a a effort to overcome the barriers of lack of an FDA approval for self-collection, which is really a major way to improve access to HPV testing-based cervical cancer screening. Through the Last Mile initiative, we are about to start launch of a self-collection for HPV testing to improve cervical cancer prevention, or the SHIP trial, which will be a US-based nationwide multi-center clinical trial, which also enrolls a cohort of individuals with HIV, but also specifically focuses on individuals who have been underserved and underscreened. Dr. Rathmel announced this network at a White House event earlier in the year, and really this network is a great example of broad collaboration, addressing disparities, as well as engaging with the community who are the ultimate beneficiaries of this research. This study will be done in 25 centers across the US that are listed here that cater to a wide variety of the intended use population. That is really the focus of the self-collection as an approach to improve screening for cervical cancer. What I want to also highlight towards the end are some efforts that we are undertaking in our division to unify some of the efforts related to community dialogues and educating our site partners. And we had some really amazing speakers in this series called United over the last year, some of which are all of these recordings are available online and are really geared towards orienting, sharing experiences, but also orienting people to some extraordinary work, such as the work done, for example, in Haiti under extreme dire circumstances, but were able to, the site at ASGCR has been one of the largest HIV centers in the world, were able to successfully enroll, despite all the civil unrest in Haiti, to a trial focused on HPV vaccination in children with HIV. I also want to highlight that these efforts, ULACNet, Cascade, and Last Mile, are part of a very large spectrum of work that is underway through the NCI that covers both preclinical development on one end to dissemination and implementation on the other. And I want to end by highlighting a couple of thoughts here, really what we have understood and learned from this, from observations and working in these networks and launching these networks, what we think are key aspects. We do think open, regular, and respectful communications are really key to define and manage expectation, as well as face unanticipated challenges like we all learned during COVID. We also think that innovations for proactive engagement with participants as well as the affected communities are critical for successful accrual to clinical trials. We also think that eagerness to adapt to a variety of these cultural, linguistic differences and working across boundaries and time zones, as well as an equal distribution of these funded resources, are all really critical elements to enhance the efforts of these networks, but also to prevent mistrust. Finally, sharing credit with the entire team to foster and sustain goodwill. As we say, complement, cooperate, and collaborate. Don't just compete with each other. We also think it's really important to build and invest in institutional and individual capacity in the face of severe resource and human resource constraints, financial resource constraints. The adage that we build a plane while flying it is really almost a feature and not a bug in most of our networks. We really think it is vital to embed some of these process and outcome evaluation measures within these efforts so as to measure the impact and change of these efforts. But then these capacity building efforts should address the variety of domains that are really critical for the type of team science that is necessary in this network. And then we should continue to especially highlight promoting and advancing trainees, those from disadvantaged backgrounds, especially because this really benefits everybody and really takes into account some of the real structural challenges that we all face in conducting this work. Finally, we ought to take the long view, which is really critical to live through some of the workforce attrition and ebbs and flows that are really germane to our field. I want to end here by giving a shout out to this very large group of collaborators, grantees, and partners across the world who are really key as we work to launch and sustain these networks to bridge the evidence gaps on efficacy and effectiveness and strive to foster equitable and sustainable global health partnerships. In fact, later in this meeting, we have a great session that will be focusing on some of these cross-cultural collaborations. Certainly, I encourage you to attend that. Will be represented by a variety of our partners from across the Latin American and Caribbean region. And then I want to end on this rather poignant picture. It is really our new vision. Is South the true North, or is North the true South? As you know, the first picture of the Earth, the first selfie, the first photograph of the blue marble photograph in its original orientation was taken with the South Pole at the top. And this is now the new universal corrective map of the world. And I think it just goes to show that we all can learn from each other. We need to invest together, and we need to approach the globe as it is, a true globe. And thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to present here, and we'll be happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Vic, thank you so much for sharing that perspective and for really highlighting the role of collaboration, community engagement, and training in building clinical research capacity in LMICs. Specifically, the examples of Cascade and ULACnet and their clinical trial networks. And so now at this point, we're going to pause and we're going to turn to questions submitted from the audience. As mentioned before, please post your questions in the chat, and I will be working with Sudha to read them aloud and invite our speakers to respond. Even if we run out of time, we can certainly connect you with speakers with outstanding questions. So with that, Sudha, would you like to start us off with the first question?
Sure. The first few questions are all related to Credo. So I'll invite Priya to respond, but there is also a response on the chat, which is really helpful. But basically, the first two questions are asking about eligibility. Are medical students who are interested in cancer research, are they eligible? And are non-medically trained clinical researchers with expertise in oncology studies eligible to apply to Credo?
Yeah, so thank you for all those questions and for your interest in the workshop. Pramesh has already posted the email address in the chat, and that is credoworkshop@tmc.gov.in. So if you're interested in participation, you could just drop us an email. The workshop is held in the first week of March each year, and applications start by June of the previous year. So in the coming June, we will start applications for the workshop, which will be held next March. Now, coming to eligibility, you need to demonstrate a career in oncology. So from that point of view, a medical student will not really be eligible because we need to be sure that you're going to continue your career in oncology. Definitely non-medical people can participate, provided you'll go through the same competitive application process. And so if your research idea is novel, relevant, is marked well, and if you can demonstrate that you're going to continue in an academic career in oncology, definitely you will be eligible and you may get chosen to participate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there was another question from Benda Kitaka. Is Credo Workshop available for non-medical programmatic implementers in cancer control, such as advocacy practitioners?
Yes. I must say we haven't had too many advocacy practitioners so far, but why not? We would be happy to consider your application. There were a couple of questions on whether Credo happens remotely. Unfortunately, the format of the workshop does not lend itself well to a virtual sort of session. So we do have virtual sessions before and after the workshop, but the main workshop has to be done in person because it involves a lot of networking and a lot of sort of meeting people and discussions, which does not happen so well virtually. So we do not have a remote option.
Right. The other question, perhaps any of the three of you, is there a Credo type of intervention available to civil society intent on carrying out implementation research? So a specific implementation research focused workshop or a Credo type of workshop. Any thoughts on that?
I don't know if a Credo type of workshop. Sorry, go ahead, Afira.
No, I was just going to say, It's an excellent question, and I think we'd all love to see that, but I'm not aware of any that would really meet that criteria. You know,
Yeah.
and advocacy itself is one of those aspects of cancer control that generally lacks the sort of organizational structure and funding that we also like to see that would
Yeah.
enable such a program. Thank you.
Now, the NCI implementation science team has an online, publicly available set of modules that serve as an introduction to the field. So, happy to give you the link to that. But certainly food for thought here on developing something that will help people develop implementation science protocols. All right. Sorry, go ahead, Ophira, while I keep scrolling down.
Yeah, UICC has actually had, I think, one of their master courses. For those who don't know what the UICC is, I'll just put that in the chat and you can follow up there. But they have had some trainings regarding advocates and toolkits and such. I don't know about the involvement in implementation science methods per se. Thanks.
What
Sudha,
about?
can I just add to that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so while the main workshop is meant only for participants, the post-workshop webinars are free and open to anybody. And many of the topics are not just for oncologists, it's open for everyone. So we do have webinars on implementation research. In fact, Sudha is going to speak to us next week about designing a survey, and that's very generic. It's not oncology specific. So I would suggest that you keep your, keep watching our website for announcements of these webinars. We also announce them on X, and you can log in if you think there's a topic that's relevant to you.
Thank you. Is it possible to attend Credo remotely?
No, I just answered that a little while ago. So the post-workshop webinars are virtual, but the main workshop happens only in person and you cannot do it remotely.
Thank you. This next one is for you, Vic. Hello, how can from Fatoumata Jaite, how can the Gambia National Cancer Control collaborate with NCI Division of Prevention, especially in capacity building in cancer? I work at the Gambia National Cancer Control Program, which is a very program, barely 2 years, in existence. How can we participate in the Credo workshop in order to build our capacity? So a two-part question for both of you.
So we are happy to talk to you and see where we can direct you to our funding opportunities, which are focused on individual investigator-initiated trials. If you're interested in, our current networks are funded in a cycle, and once we get through the current funding cycle, we are anticipating, it's not of course approved, but we are anticipating that we'll be recompeting those networks. And so at that point, it would be open to applicants from all over the world.
Thank you. So,
regarding the participation in Credo, you will need to have a concept, a research concept, which you propose to develop into a full protocol. If you can drop us an email or check our website, we would be happy to share the remaining requirements. It's very, very basic. You obviously need some sort of supervisor or mentor who can vouch for your, career path and sustain the mentoring after you return from the workshop. But beyond that, it's a fairly straightforward application, and please email us. We'll be happy to help you out with this.
There's one here from Jared. Are there future plans for new NCI LMIC's trials initiatives?
That comes to me, yeah?
Yeah, I think so, Pira, go ahead.
Well, working on it. These things take time. We are learning from our colleagues, including Vic and others, on structure and what really the needs are. That's why I showed in the first instance the landscaping analysis at this point. So, but not in the immediate future. We're hoping to leverage what we already have, including opportunities such as Credo. And anyway, keep in touch. Thanks.
Yeah. And there's a comment here on the Lancet Commission of Women, which I see, Ophira, you have addressed. Yeah, there's no other question on chat that we can see, but any other notes, comments, queries to our panelists? Maybe somebody is raising their hand.
I'll put in the
That's
chat a
fantastic.
link to our grantsmanship resources page. Of course, in the Division of Cancer Prevention, we are not constrained only by supporting grants in the domestic context. We can obviously also support folks from the global context. So we'll be happy to talk and consider. I'll put that link in a second in the chat. Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah. So there's one question about what is NCI's plan in training clinical researchers in LMICs? At the top of the hour, Dr. Rathman mentioned a program named GlobeTrek, the Global Training for Research in Equity and Cancer. So that program has 8 awards there is at least one that is focused on training physician scientists and others who are collaborating with that program. So that's certainly an opportunity to engage and network. And I imagine several from the GlobeTrek program are also participating today.
Yeah.
And Afira, over to you.
I was going to say that Priya gave such a beautiful overview of Credo, and I'm delighted to say that a number of us have participated over the years in Credo as faculty, and myself and my director, Satish Gopal, participated this year, and we were delighted to support some of the D43 grantees to attend Credo as well. In those discussions and the debriefing that has followed, and Priya, you might want to say something about this. We're getting a lot of questions of, do you plan to have a Credo in an African country? And, these things take time and a lot of organic kind of development, but I think we share everyone's enthusiasm for this type of approach, and we'll see what the future brings as we continue these discussions. Thanks.
Right. I think we are at 10:10. There is one last question. Would it be possible to apply what we learned about cervical cancer prevention regarding HPV for liver cancer for Hep B and HCV? Perhaps, Vik, do you have like a 10-second response? If not, we can put your email on the chat and Ting Ting Zhang can connect with you.
Yeah, I can only say we can learn a lot bidirectionally from both of those diseases to inform both HPV as well as the others. So happy to talk more.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have had an amazing, robust discussion, but unfortunately we're at the end of our time. So want to say thank you to everyone for your unstoppable curiosity and for asking all of these great questions. And now at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Sudha to announce the poster session, as well as the instructions for using the Gaither Town platform. Thanks so much, everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, I will need a slide for instructions on the Gather Town, which is just a fantastic platform. And so what is going to happen is between now and the next 40 minutes, we have the Meet the Abstract Authors, and it's an interactive poster session that is possible because of this platform called Gather that we're using. The Gather session, how to join the session, and the full list of posters have now been posted on the chat. So please, click on those on that link, join, see the poster presentations, and if you're looking for a specific poster, poster and room assignment, room and number assignment are listed under each poster on the event page, as well as the poster listing attachment in the chat. So we'll, gather in Gather Town, enjoy the research, engage with the poster and presentations and the authors, and learn more about their research. And please return to the Zoom meeting following that, and our next session will start at 10:50 a.m., which is about 37 minutes from now. Thank you. And we'll have to leave the Zoom and join back using the Zoom link that we used to join at the top of the hours. Thank you for joining us back and welcome back. So we are going to begin the second half of our program today. And I'd like to introduce my colleague, Sana Haider, who will lead us through an interactive exercise so that we can have a chance to share some thoughts on clinical research in LMICs. Sana is a Presidential Management Fellow at the Center for Global Health at the National Cancer Institute. And Over to you, Sana.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sudha. And welcome back, everyone. Just to preface this portion here, we began this morning by hearing more about clinical research in LMICs, learning more about clinical capacity development workshops, and understanding how collaborations and trainings are taking place, even within a clinical trial program at NCI. And in the last hour, we also learned about various research projects on Gather, which I hope you all enjoy. Now we'll be transitioning to a warm-up activity, and don't worry, just 3 questions, using the Slido platform before diving a little bit deeper into our session on mentorship. In this interactive exercise, we will invite you all to share your ideas and comments on clinical research and research careers in LMICs. The overall goal here is to help inform our discussions today and also begin to think about how these suggestions can be utilized in future programs. So with that said, please go ahead and join the Slido session using the link provided in the chat. You'll also be welcome to join on your mobile devices using the QR code I am just now about to project. All right, so hopefully that's coming through just fine. And as we give it another minute for folks to join, I will add that we have options for you to select different language rooms like English, French, Spanish, and Portuguese based off your language preferences. And unfortunately, I only speak English out of these options, so I'll mainly be projecting and highlighting the English responses. But rest assured, all the responses, regardless of language, will be included in our records and will help support our understanding on these topics that we're exploring today. So on my end, cannot see how many people have joined, but I'm trusting that you all have access
Yeah,
to the QR
that's
code.
good. Yeah, we have 148 people, so we can start with those.
Amazing, awesome. So I will get started here and activate the poll. So the first question here is, please share one aspiration, hope, or wish you have for a career in cancer research in your country. Great, we see some participants typing. Also, yeah, as you can see here that the responses are anonymous, and you're welcome to also enter multiple responses if you can think of more than one. Yes, mentorship is certainly very important when thinking about cancer research opportunities, expanding opportunities for research, having sustainable, fundable research, career opportunities. Wow, there are a lot coming through. International cancer research leadership. Yes, there are a lot of partnerships at the international level that are providing a lot of these training options. Collaborative opportunities, yes, collaborating for impact, you know, going along the theme of today. Oh, I can scroll, that's new. Mentorship, yes, another person mentoring mentorship for early training residents and medical students. Having stability in research positions, yes, I think that is really important as well. We see a lot of these themes here. Funding, a lot of folks are thinking about funding, maybe thinking about patients, involving patients within a lot of these research opportunities, these clinical trials. Support to expand and make funding opportunities more accessible to non-English speaking countries, certainly. I think that is a huge priority for at least the National Cancer Institute Center for Global Health, and for convening a lot of these opportunities like ASGCR to involve researchers within LMICs. Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of, yeah, Sudha, please feel free to
No,
jump in.
just also the role of expanding research in nursing. That's an important
Yeah.
one that we hear. And there are some things coming through chat as well, Sana.
Oh, and I cannot see those.
Yeah, and I'll read them out.
Yeah.
Funding, improving patient care through research, sustainable funding and mentorship.
Mhm.
Thank you for all those insights.
Yeah. And just to switch here on the French, let's see. Okay. So it looks like we do have an answer in Spanish about grants. Okay. So it looks like most folks are focusing on the English room here, which is great. Research dissemination, yes, certainly thinking about how, not only how are we conducting the research, but also how we're, spreading and letting other folks know about those results as well. Sustainable funding, mentorship, yes, again, a lot of these themes here that are being highlighted at the top, it looks like a lot of folks are thinking about. And in the interest of time, I will move forward to the next question here. What are some characteristics of a successful mentor-mentee relationship? Amazing, yes, trust, mutual respect. This is a word cloud. So if you can think of 1 to 2 words that come to mind when you think of a mentor-mentee relationship, that would be awesome. Yes, so trust is getting bigger. A lot of folks are thinking about that. Yes, mutual respect. I think respecting each other's time, following through on time commitments, goals, maintaining confidentiality, things like that. Open communication. Yes, that's also really, really important. Making sure that both parties are fully engaged, flexible, authentic, and there's reciprocity. I'll always mess up that word there. Yes, vulnerability. Yeah, of course, we want there to be a lot of that trust there and develop that relationship where both parties feel comfortable speaking with one another about their goals and their experiences and the challenges that they're facing. And yes, communication, inclusion, networking opportunities, advocate. Yeah, we want our mentors to advocate for us in our career growth and development. Responsive, yes. Availability certainly matters. I think in a good mentor, we certainly look for folks that have the time to invest as well and communicate with us on hopefully a more regular basis. Honesty, yeah, we want folks to be authentic when speaking about their experiences as well. Partnership, yeah.
And honesty also when you evaluate somebody's research idea to see if it's feasible, so and that also intersects with the guidance and trust. So these are great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
These are some really, really great characteristics and ideas that are coming up. And again, I think we get the gist of what folks are thinking about, and I'm sorry to cut this discussion short. But moving forward to the next question here. The last one we have is, how can we better facilitate patient and community engagement in research? Yeah, like what are the things that really come to mind? Yeah, certainly. We want to develop studies that will benefit patients, involve the community, include from the beginning. Yeah, certainly. I've heard of the concept of it's not about us without us. And, we certainly want to involve the community and partners and collaborate with the research team to learn from each other develop perspectives that are kind of based off the lived experiences of individuals within the community. Recognition and acknowledgement. Yeah, and we're seeing that theme here of involvement from the beginning. Keeping it simple. Yeah, especially in communication. I think sometimes there's issues of inclusivity. Yeah, inclusion with the language, the technical terms sometimes that are used. And it's important to sometimes even work with the patients, educate them, and provide even some training opportunities for the actual researchers, for them to actually think more about ways to make these opportunities a little bit more inclusive.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of health education, health literacy. I really appreciate everybody's responses. So over to you, Sana.
Yeah, these are great responses coming in. Yeah, facilitating language and communication, including them at all stages. Yeah, provide funding. Yeah, capacity building, patient involvement in designing the actual research. Yeah, certainly. Yeah, and again, I think there's a lot of these responses that have these themes up here involving folks from the beginning, you know, collaborating with the community, involvement, certainly.
You know, and there is some things on the chat, you know, similar notes about Miriam Mponda says awareness campaigns regarding cancer as a whole. Jacqueline Kiwele talks about including patients in dissemination of results and going, you know, ways forward. So thank you both for those. You know, providing feedback from Edwards back to the patients on the study, I'm presuming, and in its results. So
awesome. Well, thank you all so much and I see some responses still coming in as well, pass on the results of the research in which they took part, certainly. Making sure that they're a part of the process, but also they're having access to the outcomes as well of the research, and they're the ones that are benefiting from it at the end of the day. So with that, I will.
That was a great interaction. Thank you. Thank you.
I'll stop here. And I'm going to stop sharing the screen as well. But I just want to add here that, you know, thank you all so much for your active participation in the exercise. I personally learned a lot, had a great time that, you know, we all kind of came together to really collectively think about a career in cancer research. I'm sure we'll continue to discuss many of these important themes in our panelist session. So for that, I will now hand it off to my colleague, Yelena Schneider, who is a public health analyst at the National Cancer Institute's Center for Global Health.
Thank you, Sana. All these comments and amazing insights are extremely helpful for this next session titled Finding a Mentor, Developing a Protocol, and Conducting Clinical Research in LMICs, Perspectives from the Early Career Scientists and their Mentors. So in this session, we'll focus on real-world examples of successful research collaborations facilitated by mentorship. We'll delve into the experiences of early career scientists and their mentors, discussing how these collaborations were initiated, the challenges encountered, and the pivotal role of mentorship in navigating clinical research in LMICs. We have two mentor-mentee teams. First, Dr. Shama Pandey and her mentor, Dr. Priya Ranganathan, whom you met in the previous session. Dr. Shama Pandey is a medical oncology fellow at the National Academy of Medical Sciences in Kathmandu, Nepal. She has also been selected to receive the prestigious ASCA International Development and Education Award this year. Second team is Mr. Peter Sabakaki and Mr. Frederick Kakemba, and they mentor Dr. Edith Houston Warren, who is an oncologist and a professor at the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Center in Washington State, US. Mr. Peter Sabakaki, who is a PhD student focusing on cancer genomics, and Mr. Frederick Kakemba, who is a PhD research fellow in the field of bioinformatics, are both from Makerere University in Kampala, Uganda. So let's begin with our mentees' presentations. They will have up to 5 minutes for each presentation. And let's start with Dr. Pandey, followed by Mr. Sabakaki and Mr. Kakemba. Dr. Pandey, please take it away.
Yeah, so I'm Dr. Shama Pandey. I'm from Nepal, and Nepal is the country in between India and China, and it's the home to Mount Everest. So I'll be talking about cancer research from a Nepalese perspective. So the scenario of malignancy in Nepal is in 2022, 22,008 new cases of malignancy were diagnosed. And the commonest malignancy in males were lung and stomach, whereas in females, it was breast and cervix. So cancer research is still in its primitive phase in Nepal. So a hospital-based cancer registry was only established in 2003, and it was expanded further in 2013. So now it includes a total of 12 hospitals. However, it is notable that 9 out of these 12 hospitals lie in a single province, and the other parts are grossly underrepresented. And a population-based cancer registry was only established in 2018, and out of 77 districts in Nepal, only 9 are included. So it is estimated that only 2.7% of global cancer research investment is relevant to LMICs. So the common cancers in Nepal might not be adequately represented in trials conducted by high-income countries. We have discussed previously, the studies that are relevant to our setting are studies targeting metronomic chemotherapy, low-dose immunotherapy, or the studies which involve reduction in risk factors as well. So as with other LMICs, the barriers we face in our country is that there is no protected research time. We often have to juggle in between research and clinical work, which is very difficult. So there's difficulty in collaboration, poor national funding opportunities. So also there is a limited training in research methodology, and because of which we also lack with experience in writing grant applications. And also there is paucity of clinical trials in Nepal. So talking about my research training opportunities, so I received none in medical school, and I attended a few regarding thesis writing and observational studies during my post-graduation and during my fellowship. However, it was only a 1 or a 2-day course, and I have attended a few webinars online. The most extensive and in-depth training regarding research was the CREDO workshop, which I got the opportunity to attend in 2024. Priya ma'am has already highlighted about the CREDO workshop. So we were had to go with a research concept, which was developed into a full-fledged protocol during the 6-day residential workshop. And we were divided into 9 groups, and each group had 9 participants. So simultaneously, everybody's protocol was developed together. So the study I took there was the duration of intervals in the care-seeking pathway of lung cancer. So it was an observational study. So as per the World Health Organization Guide to Early Cancer Diagnosis, the care-seeking pathway in lung cancer has been divided into 3 phases. The access interval, which is the duration from the onset of symptoms to the visit to a healthcare provider. The diagnostic interval, from the healthcare provider to the date of a diagnosis. And finally, the treatment interval, from the diagnosis to the initiation of the treatment. So I aimed to identify these intervals and find out whether there was delays or not, and identify the reasons for the delay so that it can help in guiding remedial interventions to address these delays. So one thing about CREDO was that apart from developing the protocol, we got a meet the mentor session. So initially I thought it was like other workshops where 20 participants would be meeting a single mentor. However, it was a one-to-one session, and it was very easy for someone who was not used to talking to a mentor easily. So every mentor we met had a unique perspective. For example, when I met Dr. Ofira for Meet the Mentor session, so during one of our conversations, she told me that, in the so-and-so conference, there was only one female speaker. And I was really intrigued to know that, because I'd never looked at gender bias in that way. And, it offered me a unique perspective. So, and there was so much to learn with all the mentors I met during the session. And the thing I think I liked best about Credo was that it was not serving you a ready-made meal. It was teaching you how to prepare it so that you can go back home. And I even now have an idea about how to develop other protocols apart from mine. So it has given me a foundation to work further. So apart from Credo, talking about mentorship opportunities in my institution, so we have an international tumor board every Sunday with the University of Kansas. And faculties from high-income countries, like Professor Dr. Ian Tannock, they visit our center and discuss with residents. And of course, there are opportunities for funded grants as well. So when I entered as a fellow in medical oncology, so I was very excited to begin my research journey, but didn't know where to start from. So my first was a case report, and I got to present an opportunity to present it at a conference in India. Following which, my local peer mentor, who is in the USA, told her about the Society of Hematologic Oncology annual meeting. And I applied there with my study regarding clinical pathological profile of lymphoma in a cancer center in Nepal. And I received the travel grant to visit Texas and present my study as a poster there. So, all the posters there and the talks there were about CAR T cells or immunotherapy or the latest advancements. And my study was a relatively simple one. However, by conducting this study, I came to know that 40% of our patients who were diagnosed with lymphoma were misdiagnosed as tuberculosis before and treated empirically with anti-tubercular therapy. And I knew this had to stop, so my study had an impact. So lastly, I'd like to conclude that there's no such thing as a big or a small research, as long as it's relevant to your setup and it contributes in filling the gap. So we should always think globally, but we should act locally. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Shama. And that was very inspiring, especially to hear about your studies. So now I will invite Dr. Sabakaki to make his remarks.
Hello, everyone. My name is Peter Ziwagwa Sabakachi. I'm a PhD student at Makerere University. I hold a bachelor's in bioinformatics, a bachelor's in biotechnology, and a master's in bioinformatics. And I'm under the mentorship of Professor Ederson. So affiliation, I'm affiliated at the African Center of Excellence in Bioinformatics at Makerere University, where I'm registered as a PhD student of bioinformatics and serve as a teaching assistant of bioinformatics and as a co-moderator of the Cancer Genomics Working Group. Then I do my research from the Hutchinson Cancer Research Institute in Uganda, which is hosted at the Uganda Cancer Institute. And from there, I am a D43 global. So my research works, apparently, for my PhD, I aim at understanding the role of the sub-Saharan African human genetic diversity in influencing the disease susceptibility and progression in perspective of cancer. So this study is given by the fact that the sub-Saharan African population demonstrates the highest cancer.
Yeah, Peter, you're breaking up a little bit.
Coupled by a poor prognosis, I aimed at internet prediction. Oh, sorry, that could be my network. Can you hear me now? So apparently, I'm also involved in neoantigen discovery. All right, apparently, I'm also involved in neoantigen discovery from whole exome sequence data of Ugandan breast cancer patients. My mentored research project, and this is part of my PhD, I aim at exploring the genetic diversity, the genetic diversity of T-cell receptor beta-rocasins among sub-Saharan African population. where I intend to discover and their functional implications, and also try to assess the VDJ gene variations between different sub-Saharan African populations in terms of ethnicities and tribes, and also trying to explore germline polymorphism and also how repertoire diversity different tribes. So the aim here is to understand diversity influence in neurological landscape. And then my second study, and this is also a meta-research project, I aim at performing a comparative analysis of somatic mutation profiles of breast cancer between Ugandan populations and African American populations. So this study is a continuation of a big study which made some observations on the somatic mutation profiles of breast cancer patients in terms of the age. Uganda demonstrates the youngest breast cancer population compared to elsewhere in the US. And among those, 96% actually demonstrate a big somatic mutation burden. And that is also coupled by a high prevalence of mutations among the BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes and the PI3 kinase genes. So there's a high prevalence of these mutations among these genes, the BRCA1 and BRCA2 and PI3 kinase compared to elsewhere. The different mutational profiles of Ugandan breast cancer populations and other populations of African ancestry in order to identify whether the observed somatic mutational profiles in the breast cancer patients of Uganda are distinct to the Ugandan population or similar to those that are observed in other populations of an African ancestry. So I aim to compare the differential copy number variations, fusions, loss of heterozygosity, and the cosmic mutation signatures of various exposures and etiologies among Ugandan and African American populations. I thank you. My name is Peter, and I'm here, and this is my mentor and my other colleague on the call, Frederick. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter, so much. It was very impressive to hear about your sub-studies, especially the one on mutational profiles of breast cancer of Ugandan and African American populations. So finally, forgot, and a very cool picture at the end. So finally, we'll hear from Mr. Kakemba. Please take it away.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Hope it's visible.
Yeah, everything's looking good. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Frederick Kakembo, and I'm also a PhD fellow from Makerere University. And I'll be taking you through my brief presentation, which I titled Charting a Path as a Career Researcher in Uganda, which is a low and middle-income country. So briefly, I'll just tell you about my background, which constitutes the bulk of my presentation. So I have a bachelor's in biomedical laboratory technology, and it was during this course where I picked the interest in bioinformatics, and that's in around 2018, which kind of pushed me to pursue a master's in bioinformatics. And it was during the master's where I picked interest in the cancer research, and that was in around 2019, where I undertook a project, an MSc project in breast cancer, which I'll be telling you more about. And currently doing my PhD, and I'll be telling you more about what I do as part of my PhD. So as part of my MSc project, the project was titled non-BRCA breast cancer predisposing variants, which were identified in the Kenyan population using whole exome sequencing. And this was in collaboration with Makerere University and Moi University in Kenya. And what was quite unique about this project is it was focusing on non-BRCA genes. So we had a panel of 32 genes, excluding BRCA1 and BRCA2, because most of the studies conducted looking at breast cancer, they tend to focus more on BRCA1 and BRCA2. But we tend to see many patients are having breast cancer, but with no mutations in BRCA1 and BRCA2. So we wanted to look at what's happening in other genes. And we came up with this panel of 32 genes. And this was motivated by the differences in the clinical manifestation of breast cancer in the African population compared to the European population, and having things such as high rates of triple negative breast cancer, as well as an early age of diagnosis. So part of the results, we identified pathogenic variants in a total of 19 genes, and 8 of these mutations were novel mutations, which were predicted to have a high damaging score by quite a number of prediction tools. And what we concluded from this study is there are potential pathogenic mutations in other genes besides BRCA1 and BRCA2 that could predispose individuals to breast cancer. And talking about my affiliations, so I'm based at Makerere University, which is the first image you see here. This is Makerere University, and also at the African Centers of Excellence, which establishes itself as I would say as a center for excellence in bioinformatics in Uganda and in the region, and also affiliated with Fred Hutch at the Uganda Cancer Institute, which is funding my PhD. And as part of my responsibilities, I serve as an assistant lecturer for the Bioconduct and R on the MSc Bioinformatics program. And I'm also a training coordinator for a number of online courses at the S. And these include the common ones being Introduction to Bioinformatics, the African Genomic Medicine Training, and the Genome Sequencing Bioinformatics, which are done in collaboration with the H3 Africa. And I also serve as the chair for the Cancer Genomics Working Group, which I will tell you about briefly also in my next slide. So at the S, we have quite a number of working groups, and one of them is a Cancer Genomics Working Group, which aims to build capacity in cancer genomics through mentoring upcoming researchers in both the theoretical and practical understanding of the field. And we tend to focus more on cancers relevant to Uganda. So things like breast cancer, prostate cancer, Kaposi sarcoma, to mention but a few. And we currently have 2 tracks in the group, one being cancer genetics, which is focusing more on how the mutations predispose someone to cancer, as well as cancer immunogenetics, which is focusing more on the immunology for the cancer. So we coordinate this group together with Peter, mentored by 2 very brilliant minds, one being Dr. Daudi Jingo, who is the director for S, and Dr. Okoti Wine, who is on the call with us. And so thanks to the recent travel we had with Peter to the wine lab in Seattle, Fred Hutch, I came up with a PhD project, which is titled Ciphering the Molecular Dynamics of Kaposi sarcoma using an integrative single-cell genomics approach in the Ugandan population. And still thanks to the mentorship of Dr. Warren, who kind of opened my eyes to the burden of Kaposi sarcoma in Uganda, which shamefully I didn't know about. So I realized Kaposi sarcoma is emerging as a common malignancy in Uganda and in sub-Saharan Africa generally, and more especially among individuals living with HIV, but also even among individuals without HIV. But one common thing is the mechanism underlying the development of Kaposi sarcoma, as well as the infection with the virus and its response to treatment or persistence remain incompletely understood. So as part of the project, I will be looking at the T-cell populations in the infected individuals, as well as those responding to treatment and those not responding to treatment. And I'm looking forward to share with you more insights as a project progresses. I want to thank you.
Thank you so much, Frederick. It was great to hear about your projects. And now we have a 15 minutes moderated discussion with our mentors and mentees, followed by 15 minutes Q&A with the audience. So we have several questions for our mentor-mentee panel. And let us start with the first one. How did your mentor-mentee collaboration begin? I think it would be interesting to hear. And perhaps we could start with Hudi, and then Peter and Frederick, and then continue with Priya and Shama.
Thank you very much, Ms. Schenner. Hopefully you can hear me well.
Yes.
Great. And just hello to everyone on this call, wherever you are. It's great to hear you. It's great to see you. It was lovely to hear the 3 presentations just now. You know, I'm a lot of gray hair. I've been involved in training the cancer researchers of tomorrow for quite some time. And it's probably one of the most rewarding things I do. And that's the interest in trying to, you know, build capacity for cancer research, not just here in the United States, but more meaningfully around the world, on all of the continents and in all the countries, is really what has motivated me to get involved in the Center for Global Health activities. And I'm just incredibly thankful for the opportunity to be able to participate. My relationships with Peter and Frederick are directly attributable to the fact that the Fred Hutch maintains a brick and mortar cancer research center in Kampala, Uganda, on the campus of the Uganda Cancer Institute. You've seen it in their pictures. And I could not be prouder or feel myself more fortunate to be able to mentor brilliant, young, enthusiastic students like Frederick and Peter. And and I think that's enough said.
Thank you. And I know you have your clinic duties, right? So you have to leave soon or now. So thank you so much for sharing your perspectives, and have a great day at the clinic. And now we're back to Peter and Frederick, if you guys want to add anything.
Yeah,
Yes.
sure. Maybe I can. Okay, Peter can go first.
Okay, I'm sorry for that. Yes, it's Peter here. So I got my opportunity to be mentored by Kuti via a mentor, an RE mentor in bioinformatics. So my relationship with Kuti started with a manuscript review. I was doing my MSc project and I was aiming at developing a machine learning based model to predict breast cancer. So I had this mentor of bioinformatics, but then he wasn't an expert in cancer biology. So after coming up with this manuscript, he recommended me to send my manuscript to Huti, whom I didn't know before. And through that, I started to interact with Huti, and he introduced me to a lot of things. He introduced me to love cancer immunogenomics. I come from a bioinformatics background. I didn't know anything to do with immunology, but then the way how he demonstrated the whole thing, the way how he talked about immunology and immunogenomics, I ended up buying an immunology book, and I spent 6 months trying to resolve myself into the immunology. And somehow, I got the concepts, and I've been able to develop my project in the aspect of cancer immunogenomics. And I'm leading that section within our cancer immunogenomics working group at ACE. Yeah, so that's how I came to know Huti as my mentor. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Frederick.
Yeah, sure. So I can go second. So somehow similar to Peter, I also got to know about Dr. Warren through a previous mentor, who is Dr. Jingo, who mentored me at my MSc. So he came in at a period when I was developing my PhD concept at the moment, which was in immunotherapy. So I was looking at developing a computational model to design immunotherapies against breast cancer. And when I asked around in Uganda, there was no one who had expertise in the area. when I talked to my mentor also by then, Dr. Jimbo, he said, I have no idea in the field, but I know someone at the Fred Hatch who called Dr. Warren, who has expertise in this area. And interestingly, when he was invited to ACE, he gave a talk, and the talk was in immunotherapy. So I was like, wow, okay, this is the right guy to go for. So that's how my whole connection with the Dr. Warren started. And when I joined, when I got a fellowship for my PhD, he happened to be a PI on that project where I got the funding from for the PhD. And that's how we started. And as we progressed, as we were discussing the project for which I was proposing to do for the immunotherapy, it proved to be rather a bit complex for my PhD. And he suggested alternatives of what I could take. And one of those was a Kaposi sarcoma, which was also another interesting thing in Uganda. And it was also quite interesting for me. It was employing single cell, which is quite a new technique, giving a lot of insights. So I took it on, and here we are, and still going.
Thank you, Frederick. And now Priya.
So Shama and I met at the Credo workshop, which both of us have already spoken about. She was one of the 2 participants from Nepal, and we had 82 participants in all, but I was very impressed by how earnest and how hardworking and sincere she was. Even in those 6 days, it was obvious that she was very, very passionate about what she was doing. You heard her speak today about, no research is small, and the patient is key. And that was exactly what came across when she developed her research at Credo, which was a very simple, but it is going to be such an impactful project. And I will leave it to Shama to talk a little more about that project. So in that sense, I have not yet directly mentored Shama, but we have had some interactions at the workshop and some continued interactions after that. And I'm hoping this is going to be a lifelong relationship with her. Over to you, Shama.
Thank you for your words, ma'am. Yeah, so my faculties at my center always encouraged me to apply at Credo. So I was very enthusiastic and I applied, and luckily I got selected. And I think it was much more better than I initially thought it would be. So Priya ma'am was one of the main organizers of the workshop, and I think the most energetic one for sure. And we've gone so far, and I think I'd like to develop this relationship further on and go on for future collaborations as well.
Great. Thank you, Shama. And as we think about the slide exercise, I'm actually thinking the parallels of successful mentor-mentee collaboration. And I hear this in this talk, actually, the mutual respect, the motivation, open communication. So it all transfers into this mentor-mentee relationship. So thank you so much for your insights and wonderful stories. And we go to our next question. So the next question, it would be helpful to know what challenges you encountered while mentoring and receiving mentorship, and how did you address them? Because there are quite a few challenges, especially in a settings where mentorship is not fully established, or infrastructure for mentorship is maybe not here or challenging. So who would like to start first? There is no obligation for each person to answer, but if you feel it resonates with you, please go ahead. Yeah, I see Priya.
So I think one of the key challenges that I have faced as a mentor is the lack of time. At least in our country, we don't have the concept of protected time. And I think it's important for the mentor-mentee relationship to have sufficient time to develop, so that the mentee feels completely heard, and you take your time in developing that relationship and that collaboration. And very often in between clinical duties and other personal commitments, I think that pressure on time doesn't allow that relationship to develop as well as it should. And that's my take on this.
Thank you, Priya. Anyone else would like to comment? I see Peter's hand.
Yes, so actually my only challenge is the distance. So we are based in Uganda and our PI is more based in US. So it's just that distance and challenges in communication, and a late reprise because we usually communicate via email. Otherwise, working with Huti is the best thing I've ever endured in my career. Yeah, but then it's the distance and which delays our communications times.
Yeah, so I would like to add on the same point Peter made, because I had the same challenge as well. It's the, let me say, time differences and the geographical isolation between the two of us. But he's an excellent mentor. But I would say, I think he kind of had this in his mind at the beginning of everything, because initially we had kind of a distant communication with him. There wasn't so much of a communication between the two of us. But then during the program, we had a period where I visited him in the US, and we had a period of 5 weeks with him. And we had quite an extensive time to discuss about so many different things, and all the questions were answered that we had that were kind of roaming around for a big period of time. So I think that was an excellent arrangement, and I would think he kind of had this in mind. And besides that, of course, we have other people who are backing us up back at the institution. So he serves as the main mentor, but we have other people who are helping with the mentorship as well, at the S and in Macquarie generally.
Yes, so for me, I think one of the main challenges is finding a mentor first. And second thing is how to approach a mentor, because it's not easy how to approach them. We initially, breaking the ice part is very difficult. And I second Priya ma'am's view that we don't have protected research time. So I think one of the main issues is lack of protected research time and having to juggle between clinical and research as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and may I ask a follow-on question to what Shama just said? Frederick, you mentioned that when you saw Professor Warren at a lecture in your institution, then you knew that he would be your mentor. So can you talk about how did you go and talk to him at the lecture, or did you email him, or how was that first interaction like?
Oh, yeah, sure. So actually, before even I talked to him, it was within a presentation, because he came to us. I was informed he's going to come to us, and maybe I could talk to him after his presentation. But surprisingly, or let me say, by God's chance, he talked about immunotherapy, the same thing I had interest in. And it was kind of the way he was communicating things, simplifying things, motivating us, because of course, back at the S, we are just establishing the cancer genomics field. So he was kind of simplifying all the immunogenomics and the immunology in a very simplified fashion. So I just knew, since I'm just beginning out, I might need a mentor like this who is able to simplify things with a very basic understanding of someone who is just beginning out. And when I approached him after the presentation, he was open to kind of taking me in. So that's how we started.
Thank you, Frederick. Such a great insight. I saw Peter's hand, or is it just residual hand?
Yes. Just to add on that, I think Huti's love for immunology is contagious, because after the talk, everyone wanted to do immunology. And that's what even prompted me to buy an immunology book called James Webb. And as far as I know, all the members of our working group want to dive into the field of immunogenomics. Yeah.
Great. So it looks like we're running a bit out of time for all of our questions. So I'll try to condense those questions, since we answered some of them already during this discussion. So I think the next important question would be probably about peers, the role of peers in research career. So, like, what do you think about the role? What role do peers play in supporting research careers or in new experiences? I see, Shama.
So I think peer mentorship is a very important part. I think I've experienced that mostly in the Credo workshop. So we were divided into groups, and there were 9 members in each group. And I think the feedback that we received for our proposal or our concept was not just from the faculty members, but equally from our peers as well. So we were learning and growing together. And I think, sometimes peers can give us alternative approaches or strategies because they might have encountered a similar situation recently. And sometimes it might be easier to confide in a peer mentor, which you cannot in a senior mentor.
Yeah, sounds great. So anyone else would like to comment about peer-to-peer relationship? No? Okay. So let's go to our last question. I think it might be useful to all participants, actually. So the last question, what advice would you give prospective mentors and mentees in clinical research based on your experiences?
So I think my advice for new researchers like me would be like, be focused on what your research goals are, communicate effectively, and most important is to be receptive to constructive criticism. And, we might, as I mentioned previously, we might be a bit apprehensive to approach our mentors, but I think our mentors are more approachable than we are initially perceiving them to be. So I met Priya ma'am at Credo, and thanks to that connection, she gave me this opportunity to speak at this very platform. So a mentor can actually, unlock a door full of possibilities for you. But as a mentee, you should never hesitate to take that first step. That has to be you. Thank you.
Great point.
Maybe, I would love to add on as well.
Go ahead, Frederick.
Yeah, sure. So just to add on also, sometimes you kind of have to choose between 2 things. And one is, so you would want to choose a mentor who is very experienced or has experience in what you want to do to give you appropriate mentorship. But sometimes you might find that the person who is very experienced in the field doesn't have a lot of time, let me say, for the interaction. So those are 2 things you might have to kind of balance between when you're choosing a mentor. And what I would advise in such a scenario is having 2 people. One might not be so technical in the thing you want to do, but can give you ample time to kind of figure things out. And one is someone who is very technical in what you want to do. In that even if you meet for like 5-10 minutes and you just share something, they're able to kind of share insights and give you solutions. But maybe they might not give you a full hour, but a few minutes is all it might take.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Thank you, Frederick.
Yeah, Yelena, I'm also looking at the chat and, they're saying great talks. Cancer research is really important. In Africa, we are facing seriously funding issues, particularly in Cameroon. And I think there was another note about insightful discussion. So
And
I just want
those challenges resonate well across the regions as well, especially
exactly.
Challenges in protected research time.
Yeah.
And
can I ask a question?
Mentor is challenging as well. Yeah.
I had a
be
question.
Brave, actually, that's what I hear from Shama. Be brave, approach the prospective mentor, go back after the discussion or a great presentation and talk to the speaker, things like that. So great. So I think we are at the end of our moderated discussion, and we are ready to take questions from the audience.
Mm-hmm.
So may I ask you to please post all your questions in the chat, and I will read them aloud and invite our speakers to respond. And please include your name and country at the beginning of your question. And if you have a question specific for a specific speaker, please indicate that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So with that,
yeah, Yelena.
Mm-hmm.
So as we are waiting for the questions, I thought we could start off. I mean, I had a question to start off. So can you, you mentioned, Peter and Frederick, the notion of, the bioinformatics, the field, and how it can contribute to the study of breast cancer or, Kaposi sarcoma, as well as, the genomics area. So those are all very specific skills and competencies and technical information that needs to be mastered. That's completely agreed. Can you talk about other sort of more professional, sort of non-technical skills that are needed as you're charting a career in cancer research? So in addition to the scientific training, are there any other skills that you think are necessary for us to, to chart a path in cancer research as a cancer research career path? Priya?
So I think, it's very important to learn how to work in a team, right? Because obviously research is never one person's game, right? You have to have a team in that team. So how you deal with conflict, how you resolve conflict in a way which is fair and which is, not nasty. I think that's very, very important. The second thing I want to say is that, at least in India, there is this very strong element of hierarchy which comes in. So when you're working with a mentor who's very senior, I have been a mentee and now I am a mentor. And I think the mentor needs to realize that your mentee probably knows more about the project because it's his or her dream project. And, they are the experts on that field. And you have to accept dissent and allow the mentee to do something which they are passionate about without imposing your views on them. So guiding without taking charge and totally changing the project to suit your views. I think that comes with years of experience. And I think that's very, very important.
That's a very important point, Priya. And I think it's also reflected in, as you were speaking, one comment came through from Edwards from the UNC Project Malawi. He says, just a comment, the discussion is so insightful as it is really tailor-made to the challenges faced by majority of researchers in LMIC. So, we have heard the similar hierarchy issues from many countries. And, I don't think the US is insulated from that type of behavior either, but that's really an important thing to be aware of as you're thinking about next steps. Frederick?
Just to complete that, Sudha, I think mentees also need to learn to stand up if they feel a project is being sort of taken away from them in the sense that they no longer feel that they own the project. So I think that needs to come out.
That's an excellent point. Frederick?
Yeah, so maybe just one other thing to mention is, so besides having the technical skills, another skill is the writing skills. And it's a challenge, especially for us, the bioinformaticians, because you might do a lot of analysis, but until you write something and publish it out, no one will know about what you did. And it even goes beyond just publishing, writing grants. And one particular scenario I was faced with was requesting for data access for a given project I wanted to execute on breast cancer. So I wanted to have access to other samples in Africa, but they were restricted and I had to write to them. So I was chatting with one of my mentors. He advised me on what could be the right approach to ask for the data. It's not something as just as give me data. You have to be very technical in the way you're writing your application. Yeah, so the writing skills are equally important besides the technical skills.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. I mean, data sharing is important, but understanding the protocol and how to approach, what to ask for, those are great points. And those are all the sort of the steps that are important, right, in negotiating your project and the goals. No, thank you for that, Frederick. Any other thoughts on sort of more professional competencies and skills? Shama?
So I think it's natural for anybody doing a certain research to get stuck somewhere or the other. So we should always look forward to ask for help. We should never hesitate to ask for help, be it from anybody. And secondly, what I've faced in Nepal is like, I mean, it's more of a country issue. So whenever we want to apply for any research in the Health Research Council, so the page, the portal where we upload our research protocol has like 20 other documents that needs to be uploaded. And you know, even before starting to do it, you're already disheartened, like where do you get the CV of all the authors or everything or whatsoever documents. So I think, you know, it should be made easy so that we can encourage more and more of us to go forward and conduct research. So the process should be simplified and made much easier.
So the application process for funding should be made more elegant and simpler. Yeah, that's an important point. Any other thoughts?
I think every researcher should know basic statistics, okay? Even if you can't run your own statistics, you should know when something is going wrong, and you need to have that understanding. All of us reach out to a statistician, and that is the correct thing to do because they are the experts. But remember, they can only give output on the inputs that you give them. And I think it's extremely important for everyone to have some sort of basic course in statistics so that you're sure that the output that you're getting is what you wanted.
What you wanted. Excellent point. Thank you. Shama, you had your hand up.
Yeah, and one more thing that I'd like to say is like, you know, just talking about simple researches, but sometimes we get very, you know, ambitious and want to do big studies and suddenly want to do a phase 3 trial. And I think that's where mentors' role come in place. Like they're not just there to uplift you when you're low or when you're stuck somewhere, but I think sometimes they need to, you know, they will tell you that you've got too much on your plate.
Right.
And, you know, you need to step back and look at the scenario. So I think that's equally important as well.
Yeah, and you know, just sort of setting the scope, you know, what is possible given the time and funds that you have. That's a great point, Shamanu. Thank you for saying that. You know, so there is something here from Nandu from St. Louis. This is super helpful for early career investigators. I'm just curious to know, how can we ensure equity in capacity building of early career scientists, particularly from marginalized communities in India? You know,
I think it's a very, very great question. And
I guess it's across the
in the next session. If you want, please feel free to email our speakers because we are in the end of the session. You have their emails on the ASGCR website, so feel free to email all our panelists and ask these questions because we need the village to address it. In any case, so as I mentioned, we're at the end of the session, and I just wanted to say a sincere, huge thank you to all of our speakers and our participants. And I want to finish the session with this quote I found online that relates to our theme of training for impact. Unfortunately, I couldn't find who said that. But that was said. The power of awareness transforms ignorance into empathy, shaping a more compassionate world. So with that, let me introduce you to my colleague, Dr. Hyusuk Bae, who is postdoc fellow at NCI, for her closing remarks and overview of the next day. Over to you, Hyusuk.
Thank you, Elena. Hello, everyone. As we wrap up this session, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you for your invaluable insight and engaging discussions on capacity building in clinical research and training. As both a gynecology oncologist and a formal clinical researcher myself, prior to joining the NCI Center for Global Health, I know the importance of mentoring and the enormous amount of collective effort required to raise the next generation of clinical researchers. Today, we explored future opportunities arising from the global clinical trial landscape analysis and CREDO workshop, and learned about NCI's ongoing endeavors in research collaboration including Cascade, SHIP Clinical Trial, ULAC-NET, Last Mile Initiative, United, etc. And we appreciate you sharing your perspectives in our interactive session on training and patient-centered approaches in global cancer clinical research. It was a pleasure to witness the mentor-mentee initiatives unfolding in LMICs, such as Credo and GlobeTrack. In particular, I would like to give a big round of applause to the young investigators, Shama, Peter, and Frederick. Can you pass on to the second slide? I'm thrilled to invite you all to join us for day 2 of this ASGCR happening tomorrow, Tuesday, May 7th. Our agenda for tomorrow includes networking and poster walk on Gather. And in scientific session, we will learn and discuss about impacting cervical cancer burden in India with distinguished researchers from the region. And you can meet excellent abstract authors at the interactive poster session. And lastly, rapid fire abstract session is prepared. Next slide, please. And for those unable to join us tomorrow, your feedback is incredibly valuable to us. Please take a moment to complete the post-conference survey. Your insights will help us improve future events and ensure they meet your expectations. You can access the survey by clicking the link in the chat. It's anonymous and will complete within 10 minutes. And finally, we conclude today's session, and I want to express my sincere appreciations to each of you for your active participation, thought-provoking questions, and dedication to advancing cancer research. It has been a privilege to be part of this gathering, and I look forward to continuing our collaboration in the future. Thank you once again, and I wish you all a great rest of the day, wherever you may be. Goodbye, and see you tomorrow.
U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, National Institutes of Health, National Cancer Institute, cancer.gov, 1-800-4-CANCER.